I'd like to welcome everybody to the Thursday, April 9th, 2015 Finance and Audit Committee meeting here at Sacramento Fire. We have Directors Jones and Director Wood and Director Monk present. So we'll call this meeting to order. Do we have any public announcements or people from the public to talk this evening?
I have no speakers this evening.
No speakers. We'll move on to the consent items. The first item on the consent agenda is the action summary minutes and the legal bills.
Mr. Chair, I'll move the consent calendar.
And I'll second.
Okay, you want to call the roll?
Director Wood?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
And Monk?
Aye.
Motion passes.
And we'll move into the presentation items. Tonight we have the financial report through February 28th, 2015 with Interim CFO Kempo. Welcome.
Thank you. So the report for the 8 months ended February 28, 2015. Well, and this is supplemental to the information that you have in your packet. And if you have any specific questions regarding any of that information, our controller, Ron Impedat, is here to answer those technical questions. So we'll start with a look at the cash balance for the district, which is the current year is the red line on the graph. And stands at the end of February at about $24 million, $23.6 million, which is about $6 million below where it was last year, which is reflected in the green line on the graph. And that relates primarily to the FLSA settlement that was about $5 million. So that drew cash down by about $5 million from where it was at this point last year. So that accounts for the majority of that. When we meet next, you'll see another further drop in the cash balance, and that will be reflective of the roughly $10.5 million of IGT payment that we made to the state. We're not sure if that roughly $17 million that we get back from the HMOs will be arriving before the end of April or not. So it'll be really close to the end of April. So you may see either a further dip or it could be up above where it was last year.
Now, Ken, is that FLSA done now?
I believe all the payments are out. Yes. Yes, sir.
There's a couple of small amounts left out there to be paid, but mostly they've been paid out.
Yeah, there may be a couple of just minor payments left.
We're not going to see big results like this because of FLSA.
No.
Okay.
The next graph we're looking at is the reserves for the district, which pretty much tracks along with the cash balances. With the cash balance, you see it dips down and bottoms out around November. Then we receive the December property tax revenue, spikes back up again, drops down. It'll spike back up with the April property tax payment. That's, in essence, our dry period that we have to cover between property tax payments. A couple of things I'll point out here. We added the dashed line going across the top, which is our targeted ending balance. That's where we hope to end up at June 30, which is about $14.7 million, just under $15 million. You see that down below in the box, looking at reserves throughout the year. So we hope to be slightly ahead of that line when we get to June 30. That's kind of where we're tracking right now, as we'll look at in the next couple of slides, where overall revenues are coming in slightly ahead of budget and expenditures are slightly below budget. So we're hoping to be a little better than that $14.7 million. I will also point out that the actual line, which is, again, the red line, reflects those IGT revenues and payments. So that the revenue of roughly $17 million and the payment of roughly $10.5 million is reflected in that line already. Next, we'll look at the medic cost recovery or ambulance revenue. This graph does not include any of the GEMT or IGT revenue, so this is just the transports. We're close to budget. As you can see, the red line is slightly below the last year's actual and budget. We're pretty close through the first 8 months of the year. Our budget was based on about $2,685,000 a month in collections, and we're tracking at $2,555,000 a month. So we have about 4 months left to see if we can pick that back up to where we hope to hit the target of $32.2 million by the end of the year. And Ron, do you have any information from Whitman as to why we're tracking behind at this point?
Not at this point. I think Chief Johnson has a better feel of why we're tracking behind, slightly behind what we budgeted. But I could ask Chief Johnson so that next
Okay.
board meeting we can ask him to.
So next board meeting, we'll try to have some more information on why. We're not sure if it's the number of transports, if it's the payer mix.
Yeah,
Chief?
I was just going to comment, Ken, the call volume is up. The collections is down, but I've had conversations with Chief Johnson in anticipation of the revenue. They don't believe there's going to be a problem. And obviously it's always in the rears on our graph.
Right.
But the call volume, if you have a corresponding relationship between the percentage of calls and the paying volume of cash corresponding to the calls, we're still comfortable in the projections of the budget.
Okay, great. Yeah, and it very well could be a timing issue too. Just a matter of when the last set of bills went out and when they get collected.
Yeah, the one thing I know for sure is with the EPCR, it goes immediately, this new program we've implemented, so we're expecting the delay not to be as significant.
Great. Okay, again, this is the overall revenue picture, and you see the red line there tracking slightly ahead of the blue line, which is the budget. Again, and you'll notice, or I should point out, that where you see that separation between the budget and actual lines and the prior year, there's a steep increase there starting in January, and that's where we have reflected the $17 million of intergovernmental transfer, or the IGT revenue. So that pushes it well ahead of where we were last year. But again, that's offset by $10.5 million of IGT expenses.
Is that 10 million reflected in this, or just?
This is just the revenue side, and we'll look at the expenditure side. But so even with the budget did reflect that 17 million, so we're still tracking ahead of that. So this is where I mentioned earlier that we were overall slightly ahead of budget in terms of revenues. And this does reflect the mid-year adjustments that we went over as well. So now looking at the expenditure side of the equation, the largest component of expenses for the district, of course, is the salaries and benefits. And you can see we're tracking below. We're ahead of last year, obviously, but we're below budget for the year. And that's primarily related to the constant staffing number. We've seen a marked slowdown in the use of overtime in the last couple of months. I talked to our payroll staff, and they said it's primarily leave. There's not as much leave being taken, and there's not as many folks out on workers' compensation that we were covering the first part of the year. So that slowed down quite a bit, I think, which is hopefully that carries on through the remainder of the year. So overall, salaries and benefits, we budgeted about $12.2 million a month, and we're currently tracking at about $11.6 million a month. So again, if that trend continues, then we should do better than where we expect to end up at June 30 in terms of our reserve balance. And this is the overall expenditure chart. Again, it really tracks right along with the salaries and benefits. So if we're under on salaries and benefits, we're going to be under on an overall basis. This does include the $10.5 million of intergovernmental transfer expenditure. And again, it's reflected in that increase in the budget and the actual line from last year. So we see a departure there in January, similar to what we saw on the revenue side. And again, that's the IGT transfer. And the last slide I have for you is our OPEB trust fund. Currently stands at about slightly over $11.4 million, $10.4 million of contributions, and then just over $1 million in earnings so far this year. This is through 8 months of the year. Correct, Juan? We hope to end up where our contributions to fully fund the annual required contribution are running $440,000 a month. So by the time we get to June 30, we expect to have around $13.2 million in the trust fund, plus whatever earnings for the last 4 months of the year. So that fund is doing very well in terms of the earnings.
Ken?
Yes.
This is the set to cover the $258 million in unfunded liabilities that'll show up on our balance sheet this year for the healthcare trust?
Actually, it's we've got a whole presentation on that for the regular meeting, but it's 156 million.
Okay.
Is now the we've been able to bring that down to 156 million, but that's what this is building towards.
But
Outstanding.
only if you pay the ARC. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's 258.
Yeah, no, that is
Yeah.
this is outstanding. Thank you, Ken.
Yeah.
And what it's showing is if we hadn't taken any action at all, we'd be this much worse.
Yeah. No, this is outstanding. I like it. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, if you like this, stay tuned for the presentation later.
Stick around for the
Yeah.
full meeting.
I believe Chief Wells wanted something else he'd like to cover.
You know, we also wanted to just inform the Finance Committee that we are seeking proposals for a firm qualified to serve as a senior managing underwriter to support the district's upcoming, it's discussion based at this point, potentially issuing bonds to pay for the training buildings and the infrastructure that we'd like to do out at Zinfandel. And so we're actually entering into that. And Ken's going to go into the specific details of that, but it's basically to meet the needs of the parameters for these bonds that would be coming up, and we'd be picking one firm that would be managing the transactions for us moving forward. So Ken was going to elaborate on that.
Yes, Chief. What we're doing is we're assembling the team that would work on this financing in the event that we have the opportunity to move forward later this summer. Last year, the district selected a financial advisor, and that was the firm of PFM to help the district with not just this financing, but any financing that we choose to undertake. We've selected Jones Hall as the bond counsel, and as the chief indicated, we're currently the financial advisor PFM has sent out a request for a proposal for a bond underwriter to work specifically with the district on this financing transaction. And once we get the team assembled, then if we get the green light to move forward, then we have our team in place. That issue would need to be rated, so we would have to undergo a bond rating, probably from Standard & Poor's. We just received, we just went through a rating review a few months ago, and Standard & Poor's reaffirmed our AA- rating. So we've kind of already laid the groundwork for rating if we choose to move forward with this financing. So I think that was a big step for the district in order to have that AA minus rating reaffirmed by Standard & Poor's.
And those, that unfunded liability, as we do our OPEB trust moving forward, reducing that long-term liability is directly going to influence the rating and by which we might be able to get interest for these other projects. So,
Yeah, they cited the district's reserve policy. They liked the direction the district was headed in. They liked the fact that we were working with our employees to address the OPEB unfunded liability issue. They understand we're not going to come up with $156 million, but they want to see a plan. They want to see you moving in the right direction. They want to see that you've taken steps to limit that liability, such as capping the monthly premiums, having employees and retirees participate in the funding by contributing a portion of the monthly premium. All of those things were very positive and weighed in on the rating agency's decision to reaffirm our rating. And AA minus is a solid rating for a special fire district. One other thing I'd like to mention to the Finance Committee, we have a number of capital expenditures in our budget. We have about $1.3 million for the helicopter program. We have roughly $200,000 for 2 ambulance remounts, which I understand to be taking the box off of an old chassis and putting it onto a new chassis, in my very
That's correct,
simplistic view of it. So that's about $1.5 million that we were going to pay cash for those items. We have the opportunity to lease finance those at 1.5% to 2.5% interest rate, which is a very, very, very favorable rate to borrow at. We can finance that over a 5 to 7 year period and save about $1.5 million in cash. That could be used for either one-time expenditures, such as the ARC, that I know the chief would very much like to fully fund the annual required contribution for the OPEB, when we were short about $800,000, or other one-time capital needs, and or adding to the year-end reserve balance. So that's something we're exploring, and when we get a more solid proposal, we'll bring that back to the Finance Committee.
thank you.
And that concludes the presentation for this evening, unless the board has any questions of the committee.
Oh, thank you. Okay, that's all we've got on our presentation items today. And any agenda items for the next meeting?
Not at this time, thank you.
Thank you.
Okey dokey. Next meeting is scheduled for May 14th, 2015 at 1700 hours. That's 5 p.m. for laymen out there. If the other directors have any items that we want to discuss or anything put on the agenda, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
This meeting's over.